Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Catherine Pena. I'm a CARES Act business advisor. Today, we're going to be covering COVID economic injury disaster recovery reconsideration. I think I said that incorrectly. Economic injury disaster loan reconsideration. And if you've been denied or if you'd like to request additional funding, we're going to share with you today how you can go about that process. And today I have with me fellow CARES Act business advisor, Cindy Largent. Cindy,
Hi, Catherine.
how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. Hey, I love for you to share with our listeners today how they can go about getting their funds from EIDL if they've got into the vortex of reconsideration. Could you share some of the things that they need to do?
Sure. And in your introduction, we mentioned we're talking about COVID, EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL, which it's commonly referred as because everything today is an acronym. And we need to distinguish it because what we are talking about is the COVID EIDL program that was created through the CARES Act. And this program is ending December 31st. So if you have received something, an email from SBA stating that you were denied and you have the option to go through reconsideration, that process needs to be completed by December 31st. Otherwise, your application will not be processed. So it's very, very important. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this today is we want to make sure that we get the word out to people and that they really understand that they've got to get on it and follow through and make sure they're providing the extra documentation. So reconsideration, what it is actually that to be reconsidered. So if you were denied, there's going to be reasons, and SBA is giving you a broad reason. They're not going to go to each individual application and say, this is specifically why we denied your application. They're going to be put into broad categories. And so it's really important for you to understand what those categories might mean. And so everybody who is denied has the opportunity to go through reconsideration and ask for SBA to to look at their application again as they provide additional information, for whatever that reason was. So what are some of those reasons? One is that the economic injury was not substantiated. So remember, this is economic injury disaster loan. So you have to be able to show that your business suffered an economic injury due to COVID. So for instance, we're using 2019, SBA is using 2019 as your baseline. So if you give them your 2019 financials, and now that we're into 2021 and you give them your 2020 financials and you actually made more money in 2020 than you did in 2019, they're going to come back and say you did not have an economic injury due to COVID. So you would not be eligible. And so that would be a problem. I'm sorry if you all heard that. That was a call trying to come in through my computer. So I apologize if you heard the little pinging there. So you have to show that you sustained that economic injury disaster. So when you complete your application, it's based on your 2019 financials. So they ask for your gross revenue, and then they're going to ask you for your cost of goods sold. You deduct those two. That's going to give you that net that they're looking for. That's the magic number that they're using to qualify you and for how much you're going to qualify. Now, if you are a farming entity or you're a nonprofit, it's going to be based upon those 6 months of expenses that they're asking you for on that application. So SBA, when you give them that, remember, this is all being done electronically. They're looking at those numbers. If your cost of goods sold is more than your revenue, then that means you were operating at a loss. So if you were already losing money before COVID came, again, you didn't sustain economic injury disaster. So those are reasons that that could show that. Or maybe you didn't provide your financials. So if you didn't provide your financials or substantiate those financials when they requested it, they're going to deny your application.
How long does someone have to respond if they receive notification?
So there is a 6-month. There is a 6-month from the time you receive notification. So if you receive notification in June of 2021 that your application was denied and you did not start the reconsideration process within that 6-month period, then you've lost your ability to request reconsideration.
Hmm.
So it's really important that you make sure that you're responding. And the quicker you respond, now remember, they were flooded. SBA was flooded with millions and millions of applications. I don't have the final number right now of what they have year to date, but millions of applications. So you have to keep that in mind as an applicant. Excuse me, I'm sorry. We're in North Texas and it is allergy season for me. So, it's one of those things where you have to be able to get on it right away, get into the queue, because you don't know how long that's going to take. They've brought people in, they've restructured things, so the process is flowing a little bit quicker than it was initially. But it's really important, Catherine. I just can't stress enough to people, they need to get on top of this. They need to get their information in so that it can be reviewed. So the other reason you might have been denied, though, was so when there's an economic injury, when there is a disaster declared. So whether in this case it was COVID, but whenever there's a hurricane, floods, tornadoes, it wipes things out, and you hear about those presidential declarations. That's what happened with COVID, and COVID happened national. So that's why there was that influx that SBA typically doesn't have. When usually there's a disaster, it's in a specific area, but the loans are out there for those specific disasters. So it's really that's why I said we're really distinguishing this from COVID, because each disaster is handled independently. So it's important for people to know that when that disaster was declared in January of 2021, if your business started after that declaration date, then you are not eligible for that, because remember, 2019 is a baseline.
That was January 1st, 2020 or 21?
It is going to be 2020. January 31st of 2020. So you actually had 1 month in 2020. But now remember, if you started your business January 1, the disaster was declared on January 30th, and you really didn't have your business established, and you didn't have a lot of those gross, that revenue, you really weren't going to qualify for the loan based on your financials. Going back to that, having to sustain an injury because of COVID. So there was a lot of confusion with that initially, in that businesses were, even businesses that started in the fourth quarter that really didn't get established and get going, they had all this outflow of cash, but their revenues weren't being generated yet. And yet that was the information that was being used. And you have to look at it from this specific program. This program is to help those businesses that sustain that economic injury. So that has to be proven first and foremost. So if you did not have sufficient revenue, you weren't going to qualify for a loan under this program. And we had some businesses, that were qualifying for $1,000. That's the minimum that SBA was issuing loans at. So $1,000, as our small business owners know, $1,000 really does not go very far for very long. And so unfortunately, we had a lot of small businesses that started in 2019, didn't have the opportunity to really get established, to really take advantage of this particular program. So it was important that you know when that disaster declaration date was, when your business started. So there's no reason to go through reconsideration if that's the reason, because that is what's written in the SOPs, in the legislation. So if your business started after that declaration date, reconsideration really isn't going to benefit you, because SBA is really looking at 2019 and looking at how COVID impacted your business. So that's important for those and that is such a slim group of people that that's such a slim group of people who fall into that category. I apologize. I kind of lost my train of thought for just a second. The other thing is you might have gotten your reason may have been that key information couldn't be validated. So this whole process was electronic. So SBA has things programmed so they go out to try to validate your business. So that could be with Secretary of State's office. I don't know all of the organizations or government entities that they were trying to verify that data, but for the sources that they had, for some reason they weren't able to validate your business. So they denied that. But that's when it goes to reconsideration. So you need to make sure you provide information to validate that information. It could have been your banking, there could have been something wrong with your account number, with your routing number, or the name that's on the account doesn't match your business name. So one thing as business advisors, we always stress, so important for our small businesses, is that you start building a banking relationship and you have a business banking account. Because when you have a business banking account, even as a 1099 independent contractor, or sole proprietor, you should always keep those funds separated. It's easier for tracking your business, but in cases like this, you have a business banking account already set up. So when you're mixing those funds, those personal funds, those business funds are getting mixed into one account. And I'm aware of some instances where banks were actually sending the loan money back to SBA because there was this influx of cash going into a personal account. And the bank was not aware that they were using this for business. And so even though they had been approved, that money had gone back to SBA. So now SBA has to investigate because the bank is the one that's been, that denied those funds. And so now, that held up some of our small businesses from getting funding. So really, really important. And this is a case where your accounts would be, where if something didn't match in your account, it's just going to kick it out because the funds were going to be transferred electronically. They're going to do everything they can to make sure they can verify that information because that's where the money was going to go. So if there was a banking issue, you need to make sure you're sending bank statements, a letter from your banker, a voided check, whatever that information is that you need to send for that reason, you want to make sure you send plenty of information to really make your point, state your case, because you have one opportunity for reconsideration. That's it. When you send the email back, I'm jumping ahead of myself, so I'll get to that later. The other is unsatisfactory credit history. You might have your credit score. Unfortunately, some of our small businesses, they were trying to keep their businesses going. They maxed out their credit cards. They're having a hard time making payments, whatever that situation may be, and their credit score went down. So SBA's minimum credit score was 570. And so if you were below that, you were declined because of your credit score being low. Now, if that is the case, you could be working on getting that credit score up, or you can show them how you are going to be able to pay back your loan, keep your business going, even with that being the case. So you have the opportunity. Remember, everybody has that opportunity for reconsideration for SBA to look at it again, but it's depending on what you're sending to them. The other thing is for those businesses that have multiple owners, those multiple owners, anybody who has 20% or more ownership in the company had to be on the application. And so if that ownership majority was not met on the application, then application is going to be denied, and you're going to have to give those reasons. So for instance, we have some LLC partnerships where they're just investors. They're really not handling any type of control or management of the company. They're just investors. But all of that is documented. And so that's the kind of information you would submit to SBA for that. Of course, anybody who's a member of Congress, they can't apply for an SBA EIDL loan. The other is there was character questions, and there's ineligible businesses, and those are part of every SBA loan product. So if you fell into those categories, your application would be denied as well. Now, the other reason is if SBA requested additional information and you didn't send your information back in the requested time that was on your email, then they're just going to deny that application because they just think that you're just not interested in the process. You're not on top of it. So the other thing is you need to be watching your emails. Just so important. So remember, Catherine, you had asked me earlier, they have 6 months from the date of that letter to request reconsideration. Now, remember, there's a specific amount of funds that were appropriated to COVID EIDL. Now, if those funds run out before your reconsideration is fully processed, then those funds are gone. There's no longer funds there. That's why it's so important for us to get the word out, for people to really get on top of this process if they're still interested in proceeding with the EIDL loan. Now, remember, the EIDL loan is at 3.75% for for-profit businesses for 30 years. It's low interest rate. It's long-term to help a business recover from COVID. So you can't beat this as far as a beneficial program. One thing we want to stress is don't send information in multiple emails. You need to send a good, solid reason why you're requesting reconsideration. You have to send a fair amount of information and legitimate information. It can't just be a written note of, hey, this is how I run my business. No, it's got to be your document. So if it's verifying your business, it's your LLC when you registered your LLC. It's those documents. If you have a sales tax certificate, if you have a business license, depending on what business you're running. If you're a restaurant, you're going to have that license. If you're selling liquor, you have a liquor license. So those are good, solid, legitimate pieces of documentation that would be good to substantiate that. Of course, everybody needs to have a 4506T. Make sure if you have not sent that, that should go with every single reconsideration.
Can you tell everybody what that form is?
Sure. Yep. Thank you, Catherine, because I forget. I'm just in my own happy place. And so the 4506T is actually an internal revenue service form that goes to the IRS, and that's allowing SBA to request your tax transcripts. Now, that's why you need to go to the SBA website, sba.gov. You can look in the search field and do 4506T, or from a URL on a search, you can do SBA 4506T, because SBA's information is already in there. Line 6 is very important, because whatever business type you are, that however you file your taxes, if you do it on your Schedule C, then it's going to be 1040. It's not going to be 1040 Schedule C. It's going to be 1040. SBA wants to see your entire tax return. And then you're going to check box C, which is the most detailed, because it's going to give them the breakdown and the detail of everything. Because one thing I didn't say, and I know, Catherine, I have the habit, sometimes I get on a roll and I am just like chugging along, going super fast. This is a loan product. So the whole reason we're going through this, and the whole reason for reconsideration, is because SBA still needs to make sure that you are credit worthy enough to be able to pay this loan back. So this is a loan. it does need to be paid back, and you have to qualify for the loan. Now, the SBA loan products, not just our EIDL loans, but our 7As, our 504s, our SBA products, they are a lot more friendly in the sense that they make it easier for small businesses to qualify. And COVID, if you look at a regular economic injury disaster loan compared to the process for COVID EIDL, the whole process was streamlined and slimmed down to make it quicker and easier for small businesses to get their money. And I know for small businesses, it doesn't seem like SBA is working fast enough and hard enough, but I can tell you that, they're working 7 days a week, 12, 14-hour days, trying to get through the deluge that they have. And so, we empathize with our small businesses, and yet at the same time, we have to have some understanding on what's going on the other side. And that is, there are a lot of loan applications that are being processed. And, it was really difficult because a lot of people didn't understand the different programs because EIDL came out, PPP came out, we have employee retention credit. And so there was just confusion about what each product did. But EIDL is a loan. If you are in a low income area, you would have gotten the invitation for the supplemental. So you might have received a decline letter for that as well. And that you weren't eligible for that. And that was the grant part of EIDL, and they were very, very specific.
Would that have been also called the targeted EIDL?
There was the targeted EIDL, and then there was the supplemental that came with that targeted EIDL that was for those businesses that were really struggling in our low income areas. And so there's some confusion even within our small businesses that we work with, is they thought that their loan was denied, but really it was just that advanced part, that grant part. And so of course, the reason we're here and the reason every SBDC office is here across the country, because there is an SBDC office that services every county across the country, and we're here to help you navigate that and help you understand. We'll review the emails that SBA sent you and help you put your reconsideration package together and give you some insight into what are some of the good some good documents that will help make your case. So, most definitely we want people to come in. We want them to call us to help navigate this process. And for those that are on or that will watch this later on, and you're requesting a different amount, that's also through the reconsideration process. And you just need to make sure when you go through that reconsideration process, on the subject line, you put on there your application number and then loan increase. And then you're going to make your case below. Now, it's the same thing. If you're asking for $1 million, but your revenue is only $25,000, you're not going to get $1 million. You're not going to get actually it's 500. It went up to 2 million. Sorry. So you can only qualify for what you qualify as the maximum. And so you still, as I said, it's a loan product. You still have to make sure you're qualifying for whatever you're asking for. It has to be reasonable. It has to be within the guidelines of the program. And so, as I said, if anybody wants further clarification, something very specific to your business or to the email you received specifically with that decline, with whatever that category is, we would be more than happy to help you navigate that process, because November is right around the corner. We don't have a lot of time left. We have 60 days, just a little over 60 days. And
60 days until the COVID EIDL program ends on December 31st.
That's correct. That's correct. And so, like I said, they are working very hard over at SBA, trying to get as many done as possible. The better job you do, the quicker it's going to go. Anytime you communicate with SBA, another helpful hint is always, always, always put your application, and if you have a loan number, put that in the subject line. Because remember, for them to have to do a search on your name, it's amazing how many people have the exact same name across the country. Because remember, this disaster is nationwide plus all U.S. territories. So just imagine that. There's an incredible amount of small businesses, which is exciting. But that means there's that many applications going into SBA. So really the obligation is to do a good job the first time around and get that through.
Got it. Cindy, thank you so much for sharing information regarding EIDL reconsideration, specifically for our COVID EIDL program that happened due to the CARES Act. This is one of the last programs that is still out there for our small businesses to capitalize on and utilize for funds for their business. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it.
Well, we'll see you next time. So we appreciate it if you're watching us today. Thank you for joining us. Remember, if you need us, our number is 817-515-2600. And for more information, you can always go to our website at tarrantsbdc.org. And then finally, we would appreciate it if you would follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle at all those profiles is at Tarrant SBDC. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you're always welcome to put them in the feature below, and we'll answer your question as soon as we can. Thank you.